The Sunfallen Road, Chapter 23. I left Salzburg the next evening. Gustavus embraced me before I left, and his steward gave me a brief smile as I left the house. I considered what to do next. I could take two paths: the northern route, through Slovakia, the Ukraine, and then through Moldova before turning south, or the more direct southern route, through Serbia, Bulgaria, and Turkey. These lands were much less familiar to me, hence why I took pause. South, a voice in my head whispered, and so I set off at once, speeding through city after city, forest after forest, on my course towards where I hoped I would find the one Gustavus had spoken of. I wandered for weeks. I sought no more safe houses. It seemed as I traveled, I was better able to locate natural shelters in the forests and on the plains. The spirits that guided me spoke as I ran. In the weeks and months that followed, I began to need blood less, and so I fed less. It was as if the goal itself had given me renewed strength, and it was on that I lived, rather than the life force that came from those dripping rubies I had laid to consume for so long to survive. From time to time, though, I came back to myself, and I remembered Silver. I missed him so terribly. I wanted nothing more than to be back in the city, in our house, in his arms. But the realization had come to me that I didn't want to live this life any longer. I didn't want to be a predator walking the earth, taking of the lives of others to sustain my own life. The more I thought about it, the more horrified I was by the tale of Esunen's terrible curse, of Solomon's descent into his own private hell, and the hell that had been inflicted on all of us, whether or not we were cognizant of it. Many weeks passed. I ran and slept, ran and fed and slept, ran and slept. In the interim, I thought. At times, I even prayed. I prayed to find this one, Eri, who had passed through the gates. Somehow I felt as if I spoke to him, I might have a greater chance of succeeding in returning from Etziongeber alive. One evening, I found myself near Ankara. I was on the edge of the Kuruk Mountains. A village lay nearby, and I found myself instinctively turning towards it in hope that I might find some news of this Eri Nobunaki. I wasn't sure what the likelihood of my success would be. I spoke none of the languages that were spoken in Turkey, and I couldn't be sure that in such a small village anyone would speak any of the languages I knew. But I had to try. I was glanced at with mostly curiosity as I passed through the village, and some looked at me with a hint of suspicion. I looked at the villagers, and they looked at me, and I suddenly felt very lost. Someone took my arm, and I started. A young woman stood there. She spoke unintelligibly. I shook my head, looking at her sadly. She tried again, this time in English. I blinked. She spoke a language I knew. "Are you lost?" she asked me. "Maybe," I answered truthfully. "I am looking for someone, but I'm not sure where they are." "Maybe I can help you," she said, smiling at me. She was very pretty, clad in a deep blue dress. She had dusky brown skin, very like my own, a kind smile. Her eyes were brown and warm. "The one you are looking for, what is his name?" "Eri Nobunaki." "The Japanese man? He's a hermit. He lives in the mountains." She gestured vaguely northward. "Why do you want to see him?" "He has something I need," I replied. "May I ask what?" "Advice." And I smiled at her. She returned it. "How is it you know English?" I asked her. "I went to school in this city, and I taught it to my parents, too. Are you hungry? Perhaps we can offer you a meal and a rest?" I hesitated. If I entered their home, they would insist I stay, and at sunrise they would wake to find me gone already. I thought for a moment. "I could use something to eat," I said finally. but I must travel through the night. Time is pressing." She blinked, but nodded. "Of course. Come with me." She led me to a small house on the eastern edge of the village. Her parents were inside, their lined faces careworn but happy when they saw their daughter. She spoke to them in her native language of Turkish and gestured towards me. "My name is Melpomene," I said to the room at large. Her mother stepped forward and took my hands. "Welcome," she said, in heavily accented but understandable English. "Please, sit down." They all introduced themselves, but I was so distracted that I soon forgot them. They served me a simple but delicious meal in the Turkish fashion. Dinner was doner kebab, rich and flavored. They also served sel, which was like a donut, only more delicious. There was water to drink, fresh and cold, steeped with lemon slices. Although I had been in the company of Silver's friends many times, and both dined out with them and served them in my own home, this was different. The young woman and her parents talked and laughed with me in a mixture of English and Turkish, and the sense of community I felt with them was overwhelming. I couldn't say why it touched me so at that precise moment, but it did. After the meal, I thanked them. "This was a delicious meal. Thank you for your hospitality and for your patience with my lack of Turkish." "No worry," said the father, smiling at me. I reached into my pocket and pulled out some money to offer it to them, but the young woman pushed my hand away. "Don't worry," she said. "There may not be a great deal, but there is enough to go around." I looked at her. She smiled at me, and I smiled back. It struck me that it was one of the most poignant things I had ever heard. "I must go," I said, getting to my feet. "Thank you again." The young woman also got to her feet. "Be safe and go in peace," she said. She walked me outside her home, and she indicated again the north of the village toward the mountains. "If you go north and somewhat east," she said, "you should find Eri. He comes here sometimes." "What for?" "Supplies." "You know," she said thoughtfully, "he's not like most people." I laughed. "That is what I hear." I shouldered my pack and waved goodbye to her. I set off towards the mountains as the moon rose full above me and listened for the voices that would lead me to Eri, my senses engaged in case I could smell him over the cold of the snow-covered mountains. At a certain point, I found myself drifting. I couldn't be sure how, but my body took on a not quite corporeal form, and I practically flew over the mountains. They called it the mist gift. To discorporate. I wondered how I had done it. Ahead of me, I saw something glowing. I moved toward it, thinking that maybe it was a signal of some sort and I could find out where I really was. But as I drew closer, I realized it was nothing inanimate, but a man, standing by a cottage in a clearing amongst the trees at the end of a path. I pulled myself back together with a great effort of will, and I walked towards him, making sure he could see me. He was middle-aged. He was of Japanese descent, and his face was deathly serious. He was dressed in monk's robes, which surprised me. And yet, it didn't. He turned to look at me as I approached, and his face filled with knowing. "Who are you?" he asked in Japanese. "My name is Melpomene Aguilar," I answered, "and I am seeking the gates of Geber." He looked surprised, but his face relaxed very slightly. "Come," he said curtly, and gestured inside his cottage. I entered and found a neatly kept abode furnished in traditional Japanese style. I removed my shoes by the door after he had done the same and stepped into the room. He brewed a pot of tea. We drank. After some minutes, he asked, "How did you find me?" I smiled. "Hardly important. What is more important is that I have come to ask you for advice on passing through the gates. He sat back in his chair. Etzion Geber will test you, he said aloud, and I realized that he was only remembering, not really speaking to me. And it has. In what way? I have given blood to be here. I have been chased and threatened and nearly killed, but here I sit, and now I only hope that my test will not be in vain. It may yet be, he said truthfully. To pass through Etzion Geber and come out alive takes a steady heart and a willing soul. It occurs to me that that is far too vague a statement, I said. If the mind is willing but the soul is not, how can one survive? Are they the same? How can one know? You cannot, he answered. And that is truly how Etzion Geber tests you, to see the depth of your soul, your knowing, your faith. I considered. Remain a while, if you wish. Perhaps I can be of assistance. I looked at him, and I realized how far from home I was yet again. I realized how far I had to go. But nevertheless, I nodded, and I slid my cup forward to have him fill it again.